So, first step, we've got to get the grill cloth out because it's in such good condition. I do not want to risk damaging it with acetone or even just dirt, or even just getting any of the finish on it as I refinish the cabinet. It's pretty rare to find them, although in these cabinets they're pretty well protected, but it's pretty rare to find grill cloth in this condition, so we're going to get that out first. These have not been as useful as I thought they might be. This is probably going to be the most useful one for getting these staples out. The staples are buried pretty good. Ooh, and they're quite tight. Right, so that has not released it, which means I guess everything's glued together. Now, just as a side note, I'm going to try only so hard to get this out because I would rather not wreck it. And a wee daddy long leg spider in here. This is New Zealand, not Australia, so I guess that's as scary as the spiders get here. He's gone. So yeah, we'll give it a good shot to get this out, but if it looks like we're going to damage anything, I will cease and desist. Alright, we've got one corner up. I actually think now that the grill cloth is glued to this baffle board, and then it's been stapled in, and quite possibly just the glue bleeding through from the grill cloth when it's been stapled is what's holding it in place. So I just needed to put the camera down for a second because I was struggling to get this out without damaging it, but we managed to get it out, and it's simply glued in the four corners. There's just a dab of glue in each of the four corners by the looks of things. Alright, so there you can see it. This has even got minimal fading. You can see here the original colour, and you can see very faintly the bands. Fabulous condition for its age. So that will be kept safe while we work on the cabinet. The only other thing in here is the aerial. I probably won't remove that, it's not really in our way. So my usual method for doing this job is to scrape, because typically the lacquer will just flake off if it's had any kind of sun damage. I think this thing's been pretty well kept. Away from UV for most of its life, because it's doing its level best. I mean, it is flaky once you get through it. So you can see this dark staining. This is fairly typical water staining. It could be something else, but I would say that's just water staining from something. Maybe it had a pot plant sitting on the top of it. I can see a very light circular marking around here, like it had something on it. So it could have been spillage from watering a plant. Seems to have been a fairly common thing back in the day to have a radio and have a plant on top of it. But we're going to use some oxalic acid, and that should get rid of most of that. We'll get the lacquer off first, then I'll bathe the top in oxalic acid. I may bathe the whole thing, but the rest of the cabinet is actually pretty clean. A little bit just here, but the rest of the cabinet doesn't really have any staining or marking on it. As long as this V and T for volume and tuning hasn't bled through, we should be fine. If you're doing this and you get little bits, you can see there's a section here that's sort of the blade gets to it and skips over it. I find changing the direction of the blade slightly will actually help get rid of those. Just come in at a different angle. It's not the easiest thing to do to scrape, but I find that it is the least damaging to the timber. Certainly sanding is the worst thing you can do on a veneer radio. Probably okay on this because it is solid oak, not veneer. But if you sand on a veneered cabinet, by the time you've got through everything, you'll have probably busted through the veneer somewhere and you'll be into the plywood. And I am not a professional woodworker or cabinet maker or cabinet refinisher. This is just stuff I've figured out from doing it myself. What works and what doesn't. And I have another video I started about a year ago refinishing a cabinet that I wanted to put in my book. And I got it half refinished and then ran out of time and weather. So in that I remember talking about the idea that to learn these skills you just need to do it. You know, you can watch all the videos, you can listen to all the experts talking about it, but unless you actually do it yourself, you won't learn anything. So get an old radio, one you don't care about, something that cost you $10 on Marketplace or something. Check with people who know that you didn't get an absolute bargain and it's super rare. If it's a really common radio with a standard sort of a radio cabinet, that is the best thing to practice on. Strip it, put a coat of shellac on it, clear shellac, buy the flakes, mix it with methylated spirits or whatever the equivalent is where you're from. Coat the cabinet, give it a couple of coats of shellac, that helps just seal the grain. And then put whatever top coat you're going to put on it. Be that lacquer or wax. Wax is certainly easier. And in fact, given it was beautiful hot sunshine when I asked the owner of the set how he wanted it finished, whether he wanted lacquer or wax, I wasn't expecting it to rain. The fact that it's actually quite humid at the moment because it's been raining and miserable for the last couple of days. Kind of glad that he went with the wax, because lacquer, when you spray lacquer in humidity, it goes cloudy and almost white opaque, and when you've worked for hours or days on a radio, as I have done in the past, and then sprayed your first coat of lacquer and it just goes blooms and goes cloudy, it's horrifying thinking that you're going to have to strip it all back off and start again, which is another advantage of using the shellac, that you can actually just easily do that. It doesn't come off quite as well if you've got nothing under it. It'll seep into the raw pores of the wood. Alright, and then the last bits around the edge, particularly on these curved edges. You can get these scrapers with a curved edge on them. I find if you're reasonably light, I'm not putting too much pressure on here, just enough to dislodge the lacquer. And these aren't designed to be pushed, but sometimes I find a little bit of careful back and forth will dislodge small pieces. And I'm not going to get it all off here. I'm just looking to get most of it off and then bit of acetone, a bit of sanding, and we'll take care of the rest. I want to get as much as I can though. But you really don't want to push too hard when you're going around a curved surface, or you'll end up creating flat spots. You also want to be really careful, particularly on veneer again, not so bad with a solid oak cabinet, but if you start scraping across the grain in veneer, you can actually pull the veneer up and take chunks out of it. But I kind of need to go against the grain here just on the edges. Again, I'm not pushing too hard, I'm really just searching for the amount of pressure required to catch and drag off the lacquer. Other things to be careful of: make sure your blade is nice and clean, no nicks in it, because you'll drag nicks into the timber. And also make sure the surface you're working on is flat. This is a very flat carbide blade. If this is not flat, if it's cupped, as some tops are, when you do this, you'll end up gouging two lines. If you're careful, you can get away with it. You can turn the blade like this so there's less width in your straight edge. But just things to be careful of. You can always sand out, but with veneer you've got to be careful. This is not a fast process either. I'm probably going to spend several hours refinishing this cabinet. So I know some of you do look forward to the videos, and I appreciate that, but I am doing this in what is effectively my free time, and I don't really have any free time, so I guess if I didn't enjoy doing it, and if I didn't enjoy the editing process, there would be no videos. It's a bit flakier than I expected it to be, given it's actually a fairly nice looking finish. I think next time I do a cabinet like this, I actually have in my list of things, in my collection waiting to be done, I have a record player, a tablegram, which is, as best I can understand, quite similar to a Bell Colt chassis, but I've never been inside it, so it'll be interesting from that perspective to have a look. Which has a very similar kind of construction appearance to this. If I remember, I'll put a picture of it on screen. And the last bit, the important bit. One place I find hardest to scrape on a lot of cabinets is behind the knobs, because they've had no UV exposure on the lacquer behind the knob itself. Yeah, now the sun comes out. Yeah. sometimes when you've got a tool and you know you've got a tool but you cannot find the tool. I just had to make myself a new sanding block from a bit of high density foam because I can't find my sanding block. Right, it feels better, but it's not touching the stains. I didn't expect it to, in all fairness. We have sanded out most of the bleed through from the V and the T, which is good. Right, acetone. So I'm going to start by giving it just a wipe down. As you wet this with the acetone, you can see that the black area gets much darker, and that's what's going to happen probably when the wax goes into it as well. Even though the owners asked me to put a darker tint wax on it, which kind of is more, I guess it looks better in the modern aesthetic. That won't cover that up. The wax is not like a paint, it doesn't cover. Alright, that looks much cleaner in there. A couple of bits of rag I want to get out. I'm just caught on the timber edges. I'll give this back edge a bit of a tickle up. I just want to clean this. I don't want to sand in there. I don't want to lose the markings, even though it's just a 6. It's highly unlikely that's been done post-factory. Okay. Gloves on, this is acid after all. And all we're going to do is just slather this on. I'm just going to wet the cabinet with this. And it's going to go to work attacking the stains in the wood. Now some stains it'll get and some stains it just won't touch. Not too worried about the other stains, to be honest. The only other ones I was really worried about is where somebody had written tone and volume or tuning and volume on the cabinet, and those are mostly gone, to be fair. The ones I'm really concerned about, the ones that will make the biggest difference to the appearance of the cabinet, are these water stains on top and a little bit down the side there. and I reckon that's already starting to lighten up. Normally takes 20 minutes or so to work. But the wind and the sun's come back out, so it's probably going to dry quite quickly. What I have found though is you don't want to spot this on a big wide open area. Don't spot apply it, because what'll end up happening is you'll lighten one area of the cabinet. It hasn't pulled the stain right out. You can still definitely see it, but it's only been, I don't know how long it's been, about 5 minutes or so. Alright, we just lost a few minutes there. The card ran out, I went to get another one, came out, put that in, tried to do a nice seamless, you've only lost 10 seconds. The card I grabbed was full, so you've lost maybe 2 minutes. Still a wee bit of staining on here, but it's getting very faint now. This may be its limit. And I'll show you the front when we're done. It's lightened up a bit. Certainly wasn't the focus of my attention. It hasn't really taken the marker out of the wood, so I'll sand that back a little bit more and see how we go. Alright, that's as good as it's going to get. If it was going to get any better, it would be better now. I'm going to take it inside and give it a wet bath. Alright, so this is what the instructions say. Literally clean it off with clean water. Which may seem a little antithetical to some people, to run the radio cabinet underwater, but you need to get that acid off all the places where it's gone. Then I'm simply going to give it a dry off with an old towel and then just sit it somewhere warmish and dry, just to basically dry out. That's it. It's looking pretty nice as is, but that will dry out and lighten up again. Okay, so until tomorrow, that's all I got. Alright, just quickly before it gets too dark, the next thing we need is shellac. And I have shellac in flake. Now if you look online for how to mix shellac, you will find all kinds of instructions that are all kinds of complicated. But I'm not trying to French polish a 300-year-old well, I'm not trying to do anything fancy here. So the level of the flake is about there. All I'm going to do is flood it until the flake is covered. If you do it properly, there's like 1 pound cuts and 2 pound cuts and half pound cuts, and which probably matters if you're doing proper French polishing, but my experience is that that will be fine. So just ever so slightly above the level that the flake was sitting at. So this takes a while to dissolve. I'm going to give it 24 hours, the same as I have to give the cabinet to dry. That's the recommendation on the timber cleaner. Ready to go. Back to it tomorrow. Alright, well, as you can see, the staining is just very, very lightly still there, but mostly gone. So that acid has done a fantastic job. The cabinet has come up quite good overall, pretty evenly toned. That's come up really well. Happy with it. So next step, I'm going to give it a sand down and just get everything nice and smooth, and then we're going to put a coat of shellac on it, see how it looks. I might put a couple of coats. Shellac dries incredibly quickly, so you can recoat quite quickly. I may put 2 or 3 coats on it yet. We'll see how we go. We'll see. Okay. Hopefully seeing this will just demystify any of the magic around doing it. There's nothing really magic to it, it's just time consuming. You really just want to take your time. Something I couldn't do when I was younger. I was very impatient for everything. Alright, and that is really enough. We're about ready to put on our shellac. It's fully dissolved now. I used to watch a channel called The English Polisher, and I think he's still around, but I don't know if he's doing that many videos anymore. Very flamboyant English guy, quite entertaining to watch, and he was quite good with this stuff. Me, I am a rank amateur, but what I have learned is that some nice soft cotton, balled up, I think they call this a fad or something similar. This might not quite be enough, but it'll do for this cabinet. Alright, and we'll just get something I can pinch there. That just gives me a nice soft cottony and this bottle, just a sauce bottle, just something to put it in. So I'm just going to soak this, and then we'll see how it looks. That's soaked right in badly. It's running out really quick, which is fine. Just starting to get to the point where it's not saturated, but it's actually holding now. It's holding a little bit of shellac that it will actually release out onto the timber. The first few squirts there, it's all it's doing is just filling the cotton fibres with shellac. Right. Just going to need to get into the edges here, so let's try putting some here. And that should just soak into those lips. At least as well as it's ever going to. Nice and smooth. Probably not going to need too much shellac on it really, because what's going to go on it is a wax, and that's a pretty high build. So not too stressed about the amount we get on. Second coat might be nice. So at this point I've got several options. I have some clear wax, to which I can use some wood dyes. I've got some mahogany dyes, I've got this weird yellow spirit wood dye. These came to me second hand. And I've got this one, which is a Jacobean, so it's a dark colour. I don't really want to go that dark. This is probably the one I want, which is a medium brown. That's just going to add a bit of extra tint to it. I'm going to try it in a sort of an out of the way place, under where the chassis goes, and just see how it looks before I do the whole cabinet. But that's probably the colour that I want. I do have another couple of colours somewhere, so if this one doesn't look quite right, I'll go hunting for those. And this cheesecloth is the stuff I normally use for applying it. It's quite good for buffing out of that when you're finished as well. And this stuff stains like a bugger, so I do recommend going Michael Jackson. Now this stuff, if you haven't used it, it's a wax and a solvent. It's actually really nice to apply on a hot day. It's not a hot day, but it's been warm, so we'll see how it goes. Just get a little bit of cloth. Yeah, it's pretty soft. Yeah, it's not tinting it much. Might be just enough. We'll see how it looks. Tell this stuff's been sitting in a dusty garage for a while. This Jacobean hasn't been used for a while either. I just want to try just a little bit. Yeah, that is too dark. Even when it's rubbed out, I think that's going to be too dark on the outside of the cabinet, or too black, not brown enough. I have a use for that. It's not here. Alright, let me see if I can find my other colours. Interesting. At this point I have no idea what I just recorded and what I didn't. The camera stopped. It's not out of memory card and it's not out of battery. So I can only assume I've turned it off. I don't think it would have overheated. What I've actually done, just in case I've lost a bunch of footage there, is I've used the medium brown wax and gone over it. It has darkened it a little bit, not as much as I was expecting, and that'll be partly because of the shellac that is in the wood grain stopping the wax from getting through. But this has come up pretty well, I think. I'm going to do another coat of wax on it, and then I'm going to buff it off, and we'll see how it looks. And in case I completely messed up and have no footage of that, see, it's not going to darken the timber much. It is solvent borne, so it probably will etch in a little bit. But not a whole lot. The nice thing is this is completely reversible, so if I don't like how it looks when I'm done, or even more importantly, if the owner doesn't like how it looks when it's done, then a bit of time with some acetone will pretty much take it all off. Staining is still there, but it's pretty hard to see. That finish is nice, and sniff test. Smells nice. Actually smells really nice. And the trick to this is get it on, get it into the grain, and then buff it off. And you just buff the wax off to a polished finish. Well, not a polished finish, it'll come up to a sort of a matte or a satin finish. But it looks quite good. It's easy to come back in a year's time and add a bit more if it needs it. Alright, so at that point I'm just going to give it a quick buff off. I'll leave it for a minute or two and then I'll give it a buff off and we'll see how it looks. Here I am in the garden polishing my wood. Someone had to make that joke. You weren't going to do it, then I guess I had to. Alright, that is definitely more like a honeyed oak, which is definitely the look I was going for. So, despite not thinking it was going to come up too well after that first coating of wax, I'm actually really happy with that. Alright guys, well, we're done as far as I can go on this cabinet now. Certainly The chassis is ready to go. I just need to give the dial glass a bit of a clean, then we can pop that back in the cabinet. I'm actually really happy with how this has turned out. I was a wee bit worried at the start that we weren't going to darken up that much, but it has come up a little bit. I don't know how well that's showing in this light, but certainly a lot better than it was, a lot smoother than it was. The little bits of damage are gone. The staining that was on the top here and here is still apparent, but only just. So we took a ton of that out. If you compare that with how it was before, then you can see that it's a vast improvement. So yeah, cabinet's done, radio's done. Need to clean the dial glass or pop it back in the cabinet, give it back to the owner, and that's another one done. And then I can get back to, well, not one of my jobs because I've still got several others. So I need to finish editing the rolls. That is long since finished and gone back to its owner. I need to finish the Pacific. I've only been working on that for 5 years, but you know, it's me we're talking about. And I need to finish the Atwater Kent, and I really want to get onto that next because you know, I don't know if you've ever had a job that you're doing for someone else that's just taken forever, and you have a horrible mental block because you're just not enjoying it. And it's not to say I wasn't enjoying it. I kind of got caught up, I guess, on a couple of the technical details of how I was going to achieve what I was working on. And anyway, it's sitting on the bench and I need to finish it. So I want to get back to that, then maybe get on to the Pacific. And then, I don't think, oh no, I've got one more radio, but it's a Bell Colt as well. And that one is actually for my neighbour who my wife just reminded me dropped it off quite some time ago, so I want to get onto that and get that back to them as well. And I don't know if I'll film that because it's another Bell Colt. It's a later one. I think it's a 5B61, so it's into the 60s. It's all E80 series valves instead of the 40 series like the earlier ones had. They are a better radio, they work better, they have better sensitivity. And as you get towards the end of the Bell Colt line, the 5B67, which was pretty much the last of the valve ones in the Bell Colt line, those things are phenomenal. I've got a 5B67 chassis that lives in my garage that, with no aerial, just the little stub of wire hanging out the back, will pull in stations from all over Canterbury. It's fantastic. The sensitivity of those sets is phenomenal, and it's down to the coils. And the coils are interesting in the Bell Colts because in the later ones, a good friend of mine who is no longer with us, Jerry Billman, some of you will know Jerry, used to work for a company that wound the coils for Bell, and he used to tell the story that someone from Bell showed up in the workshop one day and said, oh, we're picking up some coils, but these will be the last ones we get off you. We've bought a winder and we're going to do our own. And Jerry sort of told the story. We just sort of smiled at the guy and went, oh yeah, rightio, okay. And it wasn't long before they were back to buy more of their coils because they just couldn't figure out how to make good coils. And coil winding's an art form, certainly not one I'm any good at, beyond making crystal set coils. But the coils, there's something about the coils in those later Colts that just makes them quite good. I do, you know, I'm quite impressed by just how well they go compared to the earlier ones. But we may have a look at one of those one day. But I would like to get away from Colts for a while and just go back to something else. So we'll see. I may put the camera on for that, for my neighbour's one. I may not. But for now, thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.